Paralyzed son of a Korean mafia boss lived in silence until a black little girl discovered the truth. The rain began before dawn, soft at first, then heavier, as if the sky itself was learning how to grieve. It traced thin, trembling lines down the glass wall of the penthouse, blurring the city into a wash of silver and neon. From 47 floors above Seoul, the world looked distant, unreal, like something happening to other people. Jaemin sat facing the window, his wheelchair positioned with exact precision, just as the night staff always left it. His body was angled slightly to the right, his head tilted just enough that his eyes could rest on the skyline without straining. His hands lay open on the armrests, palms up, fingers slack and unmoving, as though waiting for something to be placed in them. Nothing ever was. Inside his chest, his heart beat steadily, stubbornly alive. Each breath arrived shallow but reliable, a quiet reminder that he had not been granted the mercy of disappearance. He existed, fully aware, fully trapped. He listened to the rain. He had learned to listen to everything. The penthouse was never truly silent. The ventilation system hummed behind the walls. Somewhere in the building, an elevator chimed softly. Guards shifted their weight in the hallway outside his room, leather shoes creaking, radios murmuring in coded whispers. Even at night, the house breathed around him, alert and watchful. It had been 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days since the accident. Jaemin counted time the way prisoners did, by routine, by memory, by pain. Morning would come soon. A nurse would arrive, efficient and detached. His body would be moved, cleaned, stretched. Doctors would come weekly, sometimes daily, speaking about him as if he were furniture with a prognosis. He understands very little, one of them had said once, not realizing Jaemin was listening. Cognitive response is minimal. Jaemin had wanted to laugh, or scream, or spit blood onto the polished floor. Instead, he had done nothing. Silence had become his only weapon. Before the accident, silence had been something else entirely. Before, it had been a choice. There had been a time when people fell silent because Jaemin entered the room. He remembered that feeling clearly. The subtle shift in air, the way conversation softened, how eyes flicked toward him with calculation or respect. As the only son of Chairman Kong, heir to an empire built on fear and loyalty, he had learned early how to command attention without demanding it. Power, his father always said, was not loud. It waited. Jaemin had learned to wait very well. At 26, he had overseen operations most men twice his age would never be trusted with. He negotiated calmly, punished sparingly, and understood the difference between cruelty and necessity. His father's men respected him not because he was Kang's son, but because he never raised his voice, and yet always got what he wanted. Then came the night everything ended. He never thought about it all at once. His mind refused. Instead, memories surfaced in fragments, sharp and intrusive, like glass under skin. Rain on asphalt. Headlights flaring too bright. A shout in Korean, urgent, terrified. The sound of metal tearing itself apart. And then nothing. When he woke, the world had narrowed to a hospital ceiling and the unbearable weight of his own body. He remembered trying to speak. He remembered the panic when nothing came out. He remembered his father standing at the foot of the bed, hands clenched behind his back, face carved into something unreadable. "You will recover," Chairman Kong had said, not as a hope, as an order. Jaemin had wanted to tell him that orders no longer worked on a body that refused to obey. But silence swallowed everything. The penthouse door opened with a quiet hiss. Jaemin felt it immediately. The shift in pressure, the presence of someone new. His eyes did not move, but his attention sharpened. Footsteps, lighter than the guards. Careful. A woman's voice spoke softly. "This way, please." Another voice answered, nervous, unfamiliar, accented. "Yes. Thank you." Jaemin's heart thudded once, harder than usual. New people rarely came here. When they did, it meant change. Doctors, specialists, men his father wanted opinions from. Change was dangerous. The footsteps drew closer. He smelled unfamiliar perfume, something clean, understated, mixed with the faint scent of antiseptic. A nurse, perhaps. "Chairman Kong will see you shortly," the first voice said. "Please wait here." The door closed again, leaving the newcomer inside the room. Jamin felt her eyes on him. People always stared at first. Some tried to hide it. Some didn't. Pity had its own weight, and he could always feel when it was being placed on him. This woman did not speak immediately. She stood there silent, as if considering him, not as an object, but as a person. That alone was unsettling. After a moment, she cleared her throat. "My name is Naomi Johnson," she said. Her Korean was careful, respectful, touched with an American rhythm. "I'm a registered nurse." Jamin did not react. "I was asked to come today for an interview," Naomi continued, her voice steady despite the tension humming beneath it. "I specialize in long-term neurological care." She paused. "And I wanted to meet you first." Jamin's fingers twitched. The movement was so small it could have been mistaken for nothing at all. Naomi noticed. Her breath caught. Not visibly, not dramatically, but enough. She took a step closer, careful not to crowd him. "Hello, Jamin." She said his name gently, not loudly, not as if testing whether he could hear it, just naturally. He hated how much that mattered. Naomi's gaze moved over him with professional precision, posture, muscle tone, skin color, breathing. But there was something else there too. Curiosity. Concern. Not fear. "May I sit?" she asked. He did not answer. She waited anyway, then pulled a chair close and sat beside him, at eye level. Not above. Not below. "I know you don't speak," she said quietly, "and I won't pretend to know what you understand. But I believe it's important to speak to people as if they can hear you." Jamin wanted to tell her that belief alone didn't make it true. But he listened. "I also have a daughter," Naomi added after a moment. "Her name is Ava. She's 8. I couldn't find childcare on such short notice, so she's with me today." That made Jamin's attention sharpen again. Children were not allowed here. Before he could consider it further, small footsteps padded into the room. A girl peeked around the corner, her dark skin glowing softly in the morning light, her hair braided neatly and pulled back with colorful beads. Her eyes were wide, observant, unafraid. She looked directly at him. "Oh," she said softly. "Hi." Jamin's breath stuttered. Children did not look at him like that. They usually looked away. Ava stepped fully into the room, holding a small backpack to her chest. She studied him openly, her head tilting slightly, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You're very still," she said. Naomi stiffened. "Ava, it's okay," Ava continued, her voice thoughtful, not rude. "I think he's listening." The room seemed to shrink around them. Jamin felt something deep in his chest shift, like a door being nudged open after years of rust. Ava walked closer, stopping just out of arm's reach. She crouched down, so they were eye level, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the marble floor. "My name's Ava," she said. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to." She smiled at him, bright, unguarded, missing one front tooth. Jamin had not smiled in over 2 years. Inside him, something fragile stirred. Chairman Kong watched the security feed from his study, his expression unreadable. He saw the way his son's eyes followed the child, the way the nurse leaned in, attentive, the way something invisible but undeniable shifted in the room. For the first time since the accident, Chairman Kong felt something other than guilt or rage. He felt fear, not of weakness, of hope. That night, after Naomi and Ava were escorted to the guest suite, Jamin lay awake long after the lights dimmed. His body was heavy, unresponsive, but his mind raced. Ava's voice echoed in his head. "I think he's listening." He was. He always had been. And for the first time since the night his life ended, someone had seen that without being told. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Jamin stared into the darkness, his heart beating louder than the silence, and wondered, terrified and hopeful in equal measure, what would happen if that little girl ever learned just how much he understood? Because if she did, nothing in this house would ever be quiet again. Morning arrived softly in the penthouse, filtered through layers of tinted glass, and clouded by the remnants of rain. The city below moved as it always did, urgent, indifferent. But inside the high walls of Chairman Kang's residence, time unfolded more slowly, deliberately. Jamin woke before the staff. He always did. Sleep came in fragments now, shallow and easily disturbed. His body never truly rested, but his mind wandered relentlessly, replaying conversations he could not join, moments he could not change. This morning, though, his thoughts returned again and again to one thing: Ava. The way she had looked at him, not with fear, not with pity, but with certainty, as if she had decided something important about him and saw no reason to doubt it. He stared at the ceiling until the lights brightened automatically, signaling the start of the day. Soon after, the door opened. "Good morning, Jae-min," Naomi said quietly. Her voice was different today. Warmer, less guarded. She moved around the room with practiced ease, opening curtains, checking monitors, speaking aloud as she worked. She explained everything she did, as if narrating for him alone. "I'm going to help you sit up now," she said. "If anything feels uncomfortable, I want you to try to show me. Even a little." She paused, watching his face carefully. Jae-min focused with everything he had. His body resisted him like a locked door, but he concentrated on one thing: his fingers. He imagined curling them, one by one, the way he used to drum them impatiently on a desk. Nothing happened. Frustration burned behind his eyes. Naomi noticed the tension immediately. "It's okay," she murmured. "We'll go at your pace." She adjusted his position gently, her hands firm but respectful. She treated him like someone fragile, yes, but not like someone absent. That mattered more than she knew. The door creaked open again. A familiar small voice whispered, "Mom." Naomi smiled despite herself. "Come in, Ava." Quiet feet. Ava padded into the room, her braids tied back with fresh ribbons. She carried a notebook under her arm this time, instead of crayons. She stopped when she saw Jae-min, her face lighting up with unmistakable relief. "You're still here," she said, as if he might have vanished overnight. Jae-min's heart tightened. "I told you he would be," Naomi said gently. "He's not going anywhere." Ava walked closer, stopping beside his wheelchair. She studied his face seriously, her eyes scanning him as though checking something important. "You look tired," she said. "Do you have bad dreams?" Jae-min wanted to answer. The words crowded his throat, heavy and useless. Ava waited, unbothered by his silence. "That's okay," she said after a moment. "Sometimes dreams don't need words." She climbed onto the chair by the window and opened her notebook. Inside were pages filled with drawings, people, buildings, skies layered with color. "I draw when I want to think," she explained. "It helps me hear myself better." She glanced at him. "Do you want me to draw for you?" He could not nod, could not speak, but his eyes shifted, just slightly, toward the notebook. Ava noticed instantly. Naomi froze. Ava's lips parted in awe. "Mom," she whispered. He looked at it. Naomi stepped closer, her pulse quickening. She crouched beside Jae-min, careful not to overwhelm him. "Jae-min," she said calmly, "if you understood her, can you try again?" Jae-min gathered every ounce of strength he had left. His gaze moved, deliberate this time, resting on Ava's notebook. Ava gasped. He did it again. Naomi's breath trembled. This was no reflex, no accident. This was intention. She straightened slowly, her professional mind racing even as emotion threatened to overtake it. "You see," Ava said softly, smiling at Jae-min as if this confirmed something she had always known. "You're not quiet. You're just careful." The word struck him deeply. Careful. Yes, that was it. He had been careful with every breath, every thought, every moment of hope. Because hope, once broken, cut deeper than fear. Ava began to draw. She worked quietly, glancing up at him often, narrating her thoughts as she went. "I'm drawing a window," she said, "and rain, because you like to watch it." Jae-min felt something warm bloom in his chest, a connection fragile but undeniable. When Naomi finished her work, she lingered instead of leaving. "If it's all right," she said carefully, "Ava can stay for a while." One of the guards shifted outside the door, but no one objected. That alone told Naomi something important. Chairman Kong was watching. Over the next few days, a routine formed. Naomi tended to Jae-min with increasing attention, adjusting her approach based on the smallest signs, an eye movement, a breath held too long, a flicker of tension in his jaw. And Ava. Ava talked. She talked about her school in the United States, about missing her friends, about how souls smelled different after rain. She told him stories about her father, gone now, but still alive in her memories. My dad used to say silence wasn't empty, she said one afternoon, swinging her legs from the chair. He said it was full of things people are too scared to say out loud. Jamin swallowed hard. Are you scared? Ava asked him suddenly. The question hung between them, delicate and dangerous. Jamin closed his eyes. Ava nodded as if he had answered. That's okay. I think brave people get scared more than anyone. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. But I won't tell anyone your secrets. Something inside Jamin broke open then, not violently, but slowly, like ice melting after a long winter. He realized, with a clarity that frightened him, that Ava was not just passing time with him. Chairman Kong noticed the changes immediately. Reports from the medical staff grew more detailed, more hopeful. He's responding, Naomi told him during their first private meeting. Subtly but consistently. He understands more than we realized. Kang's expression darkened. And the child? She helps, Naomi said carefully. She engages him, gives him motivation. Kang's jaw tightened. Motivation is a liability. With respect, Naomi replied, her voice steady despite the power imbalance. So is despair. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Kang spoke. She may stay. For now. Naomi inclined her head. Thank you, Chairman. As she left the study, her hands trembled. She knew she was walking a dangerous line. The first time Ava touched Jamin's hand, it was accidental. She had been reaching for a fallen pencil when her fingers brushed his. She froze, eyes wide. Sorry. She pulled back instinctively, but Jamin felt the loss immediately. The warmth vanished, leaving a hollow ache behind. Before he could stop himself, he tried again. This time, his finger moved. Just barely. Ava gasped softly, then smiled so brightly it hurt to look at her. You did that, she whispered. I knew you could. She placed her hand over his again, deliberately this time. Jamin focused with everything he had. His finger twitched beneath her palm. Ava didn't shout, didn't run for her mother. She simply held his hand and smiled, tears pooling in her eyes. I'll help you, she said. We'll do it together. In that moment, something shifted irrevocably. Jamin was no longer just surviving. He was reaching back. But outside the penthouse walls, whispers had begun to circulate. Rivals noticed the changes in Kang's routine, the increased security, the sudden presence of a foreign nurse and a child. In their world, any sign of weakness was an invitation, and the silent heir was no longer silent. As Ava colored beside him that evening, Jamin felt a familiar unease crawl up his spine. For the first time in years, he was afraid. Not for himself. For her. The city changed its posture when it sensed blood. It was subtle. An extra car idling too long at an intersection, a message delayed by minutes instead of seconds, a rumor passing through channels that had been quiet for years. Seoul had learned to read power the way sailors read weather, and something in the air had shifted. Chairman Kong felt it before anyone said a word. He stood at the window of his study, hands clasped behind his back, watching the river coil through the city like a patient animal. The lights along the bridges flickered on as dusk deepened. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, older than he remembered, heavier with decisions that had never truly ended. Report, he said. The man behind him spoke carefully. There's movement, sir. Nothing direct. Questions being asked. Kong nodded once. He did not turn. About your son. Silence settled like dust. They smell weakness, Kong said. It was not a question. Yes, Chairman. Kong closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. When he opened them, the city seemed farther away. Double security, he said. Inside and out. No exceptions. And the nurse? The child? Kang's jaw tightened. They remain, but they are watched. Jamin did not know any of this. He knew only the rhythm of his days, the way time bent itself around Ava's presence, How the world felt closer now. Mornings began with Naomi's quiet efficiency, her voice anchoring him as she moved him gently through the necessary indignities of care. Afternoons belonged to Ava, her stories, her drawings, her relentless curiosity. Evenings were harder. Evenings brought memory. He watched the sky darken through the window, shadows pooling in corners, and the past crept in uninvited. The crash, the pain, the moment he realized his body was no longer his. Some nights, the weight of it pressed so hard on his chest, he struggled to breathe. Ava noticed everything. "You're sad again," she said one evening, sitting cross-legged beside him. She had learned to read the tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes. He did not deny it. She flipped to a fresh page in her notebook. "Tell me with your eyes," she said. "Is it because of before?" He blinked once. "Yes." "Was it loud?" she asked softly. His throat tightened. He blinked again. Ava nodded slowly. "Loud things leave quiet behind," she said. "My dad said that." She tore the page from her notebook and folded it carefully. "This is for you," she said, placing it gently in his open palm. He felt the paper. Thin. Real. He focused. His fingers curled, just a little, around the folded square. Ava sucked in a breath. "You held it." Naomi, watching from the doorway, felt tears sting her eyes. Progress, she reminded herself. Slow. Fragile. But real. Naomi began documenting everything. Every eye movement. Every finger twitch. Every shift in breathing. She adjusted her methods, introduced new stimuli, spoke directly to him about her observations. "You're still in there," she said one afternoon, her voice thick with restrained emotion. "I know you are." She never spoke of miracles. She spoke of work. But she also spoke of fear. Late at night, after Ava was asleep, Naomi sat alone in the guest suite. Contracts spread out on the table. The clauses read differently now. The warnings. The confidentiality. The silence demanded of her. She had accepted the job for stability. For safety. Now she wondered what price that safety would demand. The first threat arrived disguised as coincidence. A black sedan followed Naomi and Ava from the building one afternoon, keeping a careful distance, never close enough to be obvious. Naomi noticed anyway. She had learned vigilance the hard way. She changed routes twice. The car stayed with them. By the time they returned to the penthouse, her hands were shaking. She said nothing at first, but Jamin noticed. The moment Naomi entered his room, he felt it. The shift in her energy. The tension coiled tight beneath her calm exterior. "Ava, sweetheart," Naomi said gently. "Why don't you draw in the other room for a bit?" Ava frowned. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Naomi said quickly. "I just need to talk." Ava hesitated, then glanced at Jamin. "I'll be back," she promised him. "Don't forget me." As if he ever could. When the door closed, Naomi turned back to Jamin, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone followed us today." His heart lurched. "Not security," she continued. "Someone else." Jamin's breath quickened. He wanted to tell her, to warn her, to explain exactly what kind of world she had stepped into. He tried to speak. Nothing came. Naomi watched her struggle, her own fear sharpening into resolve. "I won't let anything happen to Ava," she said firmly. "Or to you." She paused. "But you need to help me. However you can." He locked his gaze on hers. This mattered. That night, Jamin did not sleep. He counted footsteps outside his door, listened to the rhythm of guard rotations, mapped the house in his mind, as he had done countless times before. This was his world, his father's world, and now it was threatening to swallow the only good thing that had touched his life in years. He remembered meetings held in rooms like this, discussions of leverage and collateral damage. He remembered how easily words like necessary were used to justify cruelty. The thought of Ava becoming a variable in someone else's equation made something cold and furious stir inside him. He would not allow it. The next day, he tried again. Ava sat beside him, reading aloud from a children's book she had brought from home. Her voice rose and fell with dramatic flair, bringing the characters to life. And then the dragon realized he didn't have to be scary to be strong. She finished proudly. She looked up at him. Do you think that's true? Jamin swallowed. He gathered every fragment of strength he had left, every ounce of will that had kept him alive through endless nights of silence. His lips parted. A sound escaped. It was rough, broken, barely recognizable as speech. Ava froze. Naomi, standing nearby, turned sharply. Ah, Jamin breathed. The sound echoed in the room, fragile and astonishing. Ava's eyes filled instantly. You talked. Jamin's chest burned. He forced air through lungs that felt too small. Of Virginia. The effort stole his breath, left him trembling. Ava rushed forward, grabbing his hand. You said my name, she whispered, awestruck. Naomi dropped to her knees beside them, tears streaming freely now. Oh my God, she breathed. Jamin. He sagged back against the chair, exhausted beyond words. But inside him, something blazed, defiant and alive. He had crossed a line. There was no going back. Chairman Kong was informed within minutes. He arrived an hour later, his presence filling the room before he even spoke. He dismissed the guards, stood before his son, and waited. Say it again, Kong said quietly. Jamin looked at him, really looked at him. This man, his father, had built an empire on silence and fear, had taught him restraint, control, patience. Jamin opened his mouth. The word came slower this time, but clearer. Father. Kang's composure fractured. He reached out, gripping the arm of the wheelchair as if anchoring himself. You can speak. Yes, Jamin said, voice trembling. A little. Kang straightened, emotion hardening into steel. Then listen to me. You are not weak. Do you understand? Jamin met his gaze steadily. I never was. Something like pride flickered across Kang's face, quickly buried beneath caution. This changes things, Kang said. For all of us. Jamin knew that tone. Danger had entered the room. The attacks did not come immediately. They never did. Instead, pressure mounted quietly. Subtle disruptions. Unsettling encounters. A message delivered without words. One afternoon, Ava returned from the garden pale and shaken. There was a man, she said softly to Naomi. He asked me my name. Naomi's blood ran cold. What did you say? I didn't, Ava replied. I remembered what you said. I ran. Jamin's vision tunneled. His hands clenched uselessly. This was his fault. That night, he forced himself to speak again, each word dragging pain behind it. They will use her, he said hoarsely to Naomi. To reach me. To reach my father. Naomi's face hardened. Then we protect her. How? Jamin demanded weakly. You don't know these people. I know fear, Naomi said, and I know when to stand my ground. Jamin closed his eyes. He had lived his life believing power meant control. Now, trapped in a body that barely obeyed him, he was learning a different truth. Power was choosing who mattered, and he chose her. Ava sensed the tension even if she didn't understand it. Did I do something bad? She asked Jamin quietly one evening. He shook his head, slow and deliberate. No. Then why does everyone look scared? He struggled for words. Because sometimes grown-ups forget how to be brave. Ava considered this. Then I'll help, she said. I'm not scared of them. He smiled faintly. I know. But fear, once introduced, does not leave easily. And somewhere in the city, men were making plans. Because the silent heir had found his voice. And voices could be silenced. The night the silence finally broke, it did not begin with shouting or gunfire. It began with darkness. The power cut without warning. One moment, the penthouse glowed with its usual restrained elegance, soft lighting, the hum of machines, the distant city flickering beyond glass. And the next, everything vanished into black. Ava gasped. Naomi froze mid-step. Jamin felt it before he understood it. The sudden absence of sound, the way the air seemed to tighten, as if the building itself had drawn a sharp breath. Then came the backup generators. They should have engaged immediately. They did not. For 3 long seconds, the world remained dark. In those 3 seconds, Jamin knew. This isn't an outage. Naomi whispered, her voice barely audible. This is intentional. Ava's small hand found Naomi's sleeve. Mom. Naomi crouched, pulling her close. Stay with me. Don't move. Jamin's heart hammered against his ribs. His gaze strained uselessly into the darkness, his mind racing faster than his body ever could. This was it. He had seen this pattern before, years ago, from the other side of the table. The way an attack always began with confusion, with isolation, with the illusion of chaos masking something precise and deliberate. The generators finally kicked in, bathing the room in dim emergency light. And then the alarms began to scream. Not the building alarms. Not fire or evacuation. Security alarms. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. Too many, too fast, overlapping in a way that told Jamin everything he needed to know. This was not an internal breach. This was war. Naomi grabbed Ava and pulled her behind the heavy sofa, her movements sharp and decisive. She pressed Ava's head into her chest, one hand covering the girl's ears. No matter what happens, Naomi whispered urgently, you do not move. You do not look. Do you understand? Ava nodded, her body trembling. Jamin tried to speak. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Panic surged. The door burst open. Men flooded into the room, silhouettes against the emergency lights, guns raised, movements efficient and merciless. Their faces were covered, but Jamin didn't need to see them to recognize the intent in their posture. One of them spoke. Where's the child? Naomi's breath hitched. Jamin's world narrowed to that single sentence. They weren't here for him. They were here for Ava. No, Naomi said, her voice shaking but loud. Please, there's no reason. A gun was raised toward her. Jamin's chest burned. This was his fault. Every choice, every breath, every moment he had allowed himself to hope. It had all led here. Something inside him snapped, not gently, not slowly, but with the violence of something long restrained finally breaking free. No, the word tore from his throat, raw and hoarse, but unmistakably human. Every man in the room froze. Naomi stared at him. Ava lifted her head, eyes wide with shock. The gunman closest to him turned slowly. He talked. Jamin sucked in air, pain slicing through his lungs. His body screamed in protest, but he forced the words out anyway. Leave, he said, each syllable costing him. Them. Alone. The leader stepped closer, gun trained on Jamin's chest. You found your voice, he said coolly. Pity. Before he could pull the trigger, the room exploded into chaos. Gunfire shattered the air. Glass burst outward. Guards loyal to Chairman Kong stormed in from both sides, weapons blazing. The sound was deafening, a violent symphony of shouts and metal and fear. Naomi shielded Ava with her body, screaming her name over and over. Jamin could do nothing but watch. The fight ended as abruptly as it began. When the smoke cleared, the room was destroyed, furniture overturned, walls scarred, glass littering the floor like frozen rain. The intruders lay motionless, disarmed or worse. Silence returned. Not the old silence. This one was heavy with aftermath. Jamin sagged back in his chair, his body trembling uncontrollably. His throat burned, his vision blurred, but he was still conscious. Still here. Naomi crawled toward him. Ava clutched tightly to her chest. You spoke, Naomi whispered, tears streaming down her face. You saved us. Ava broke free and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck without hesitation. You used your voice, she cried. I knew you would. Jamin closed his eyes. For the first time since the accident, he wept. Chairman Kong arrived minutes later. He took in the wreckage with a single glance, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes found his son. Jamin looked smaller than ever in the ruined room, exhausted, pale, but unmistakably alive. You spoke, Kong said quietly. Yes, Jamin replied, his voice barely above a whisper. For them. Kong walked forward slowly, stopping directly in front of the wheelchair. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he knelt. The men outside would talk about this for years, the day Chairman Kong knelt before anyone. I failed you, Kong said, his voice breaking for the first time Jamin could remember. I thought silence would protect you. Jamin met his father's gaze. It didn't. Kong nodded once. No, it didn't. He turned to Naomi and Ava. You are under my protection, he said, absolute and final. Anyone who threatens you answers to me. Naomi swallowed hard, but she did not look away. Then help him, she said. Not as an asset, as your son. Something shifted in Kang's eyes. I will, he said. Recovery did not come easily after that night. Jamin paid for every word he had forced from his body. His voice vanished again for days, his muscles locked in rebellion, his mind exhausted beyond measure. But something fundamental had changed. He had crossed a threshold. Naomi adjusted his therapy, working patiently, relentlessly. Ava stayed close, reading to him, talking to him, reminding him, constantly, that he was not alone in the fight to return. You don't have to be loud, she told him one afternoon. You just have to be real. He smiled faintly. You're very wise. She grinned. I know. Outside, Chairman Kong moved with ruthless efficiency. The message sent that night was unmistakable. The cost of touching his son, of touching the child, was too high. The city listened. The whispers stopped. Weeks later, Jamin stood for the first time. Not alone, not steady, but standing. Naomi supported one side, a therapist the other. Ava watched from the chair, hands clasped tightly, her face shining with pride. You're doing it, she whispered. Jamin trembled, every muscle screaming, but he did not fall. I am, he said softly. Each word still hurt, but each one was a victory. Through the window, the city glowed beneath them, vast and alive. For the first time since the accident, Jamin did not feel like a ghost watching life from behind glass. He was part of it again, and the silence that had once imprisoned him now felt different. It felt chosen. The body remembers fear long after the mind decides it is safe. Jamin learned this in the weeks that followed the night of gunfire and broken glass. Even when the penthouse was repaired, when the guards doubled and then tripled, when the city outside resumed its indifferent rhythm, his muscles still tightened at sudden sounds. His breath still caught when doors opened too quickly. His voice, when it came at all, arrived thin and fragile, as if unsure it would be welcomed. Recovery was not a straight line. It was a slow, humiliating negotiation between what he wanted and what his body would allow. Some days, he spoke 3 words and collapsed into exhaustion. Other days, he could not speak at all. His legs responded inconsistently, twitching, locking, trembling under his weight like strangers who did not recognize him. Naomi never lied to him about it. There will be setbacks, she said one morning, adjusting the straps on the standing frame. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying or selling something. Jamin smiled faintly. You don't soften things. No, she replied gently, but I don't abandon people either. Ava watched from the floor, legs folded beneath her, holding a stopwatch she had insisted on using. 30 seconds today, she announced proudly. Yesterday was 28. Jamin laughed, and immediately regretted it as pain flared through his ribs. Still, the sound startled him. It had been a long time since laughter had come so naturally. Ava beamed. See, your voice likes being used. Chairman Kong observed these sessions from a distance. He did not hover. He did not interfere. But he watched through glass, through reports, through the careful, restrained updates Naomi provided. It unsettled him. Not the weakness. He had always understood weakness. What unsettled him was the intimacy. He saw the way Naomi spoke to his son, without fear. The way Ava climbed onto the floor beside him, unconcerned with status or consequence. The way Jamin looked at them, not like assets, not like liabilities, but like something dangerously close to family. Kong had built his empire on control. This was something else. One evening, after Ava had fallen asleep in the guest suite, Kong asked Naomi to join him in the study. You are changing him, Kong said without preamble. Naomi did not flinch. He is changing himself. Kong studied her carefully. Do you understand where you are? Yes, Naomi replied. And I understand who he is. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Kong spoke again. My son will inherit everything I have built. Naomi met his gaze. Then let him inherit a reason to live. The words landed heavily. Kong dismissed her shortly after, but long after she left, he remained standing at the window, staring into the city, wondering when power had stopped being enough. Jamin's relationship with his father changed slowly. They did not speak often at first. When they did, the conversations were careful, tentative, stripped of old assumptions. I thought silence would protect you, Kong said one night, sitting across from him. I thought if you were unseen, you would be safe. Jamin swallowed. I wasn't living. Kong nodded once. No. The admission felt heavier than any apology. For the first time, Jamin saw his father not as an untouchable force, but as a man who had made choices, and would have to live with them. Naomi and Jamin found themselves alone together more often as Ava returned to school part-time under heavy security. Those hours were quieter, more introspective. You don't have to stay, Jamin said one afternoon, his voice steadier than it had been weeks ago. Once. I'm better. Naomi paused, her hands resting on the wheelchair handles. Do you want me to leave? He considered the question carefully. No. Then I'm here, she said simply. Something unspoken settled between them, gentle, restrained, but undeniably present. They never crossed a line. Not physically, not verbally, but sometimes, when she adjusted his collar or helped him drink water, her fingers lingered just a second longer than necessary. Sometimes, when he looked at her, his gaze held a gratitude too deep to be purely professional. They both felt it. Neither rushed it. Ava noticed anyway. You like my mom, she announced one day, blunt as only a child could be. Jamin nearly choked on his water. Naomi froze. Ava. What? Ava shrugged. You do. Your eyes get softer. Jamin cleared his throat, color rising in his cheeks. I respect her. Ava grinned. That's how it starts. Naomi hid her smile behind her hand. The calm did not last. It never did. The final threat arrived quietly, carried on a piece of information Chairman Kong could not ignore. A rival syndicate, older, patient, deeply resentful, had not been deterred by the failed attack. They were waiting, planning something irreversible. They will not come for the child again, Kong said grimly during a private meeting. They will come for you. Jamin met his father's gaze steadily. Then let them. Kong frowned. You are not ready. Jamin's voice was quiet but firm. I am done hiding. Naomi felt a chill run through her. This was the moment she had feared, the point where survival and agency collided. The confrontation came at dawn, not with guns blazing, but with an invitation. A message delivered through channels Kong trusted. A meeting. Neutral ground. One chance to end it. Kong prepared for war. Jamin prepared for choice. I'm coming, Jamin said. No, Naomi said immediately. You're not. He looked at her, calm and resolved. This is my life. And you just got it back, she replied fiercely. Don't throw it away. Ava stood between them, looking from one face to the other. He has to go, she said quietly, but not alone. Jamin felt something tighten in his chest. He reached out, slow, deliberate, and placed his hand over Naomi's. I won't disappear again, he said. I promise. She searched his face, then nodded once. Then I'm trusting you. The meeting took place in an abandoned riverside warehouse, stripped of pretense. Men stood on both sides, weapons visible but restrained. Jamin arrived in his wheelchair, flanked by guards, his father beside him. The rival leader, a man older than Kong, eyes sharp with old grudges, smiled thinly. So he said, the silent heir speaks. Jamin met his gaze. Enough. The negotiation was brutal in its honesty. Old debts, old blood, old wounds. Jamin listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his words were measured, deliberate. I will not inherit a war, he said. If you want conflict, you will have it with me. Not through children, not through shadows. The rival studied him for a long moment. Finally, he laughed. You are not your father. No, Jamin agreed. I'm not. That was the moment everything shifted. They reached an agreement, uneasy, fragile, but real. When Jae-min returned home, exhausted and pale, Ava ran to him without hesitation. "You did it," she said, hugging him tightly. "We did," he corrected softly. Naomi watched from the doorway, her heart full and terrified all at once, because she knew this was not an ending. It was a beginning, and beginnings required courage. That night, as the city slept, Jae-min stood again by the window, unsupported this time, just for a moment. The city lights reflected back at him, not distant now, but familiar. He was still healing, still afraid, still learning how to live aloud. But for the first time since the accident, he believed, truly believed, that his life was his to choose. The morning after the agreement, the city woke as if nothing had happened. Traffic resumed its impatient rhythm. Vendors lifted metal shutters. Coffee steamed into the winter air. From the river, a thin fog rose and unraveled, strand by strand, until the skyline sharpened again into its familiar edges. Inside the penthouse, Jae-min sat at the window and let the light reach him. He did not rush the moment. He had learned that rushing cost him strength. Instead, he breathed slowly, counted the seconds between each inhale and exhale, and let his body decide what it was willing to give. The chair waited behind him. He stood without it, not for long, not perfectly. His knees trembled, his calves burned, and the muscles along his spine protested with sharp insistence. But he stood, hands braced lightly against the cool glass. The city stretched wide before him, alive, present. A soft sound behind him made him turn his head. Ava stood in the doorway, already dressed for school, her backpack hanging from one shoulder. She froze when she saw him upright. "You're standing," she whispered, as if afraid the words might knock him over. Jae-min smiled, breathless. Just for a little. She ran to him and hugged his legs carefully, pressing her cheek against his thigh. "I knew you could," she said with fierce certainty. "You just needed time." He rested a hand on her shoulder, grounding himself. "You gave me more than time." Naomi appeared a moment later, taking in the scene with wide, shining eyes. She did not rush forward. She did not speak. She simply watched him stand, watched Ava cling to him like a promise made flesh, and pressed a hand to her mouth. When he finally sat, carefully, deliberately, Naomi crossed the room and knelt in front of him. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired," he said honestly. Then, after a pause, "Whole." Her gaze softened. "That's the part most people forget to measure." The weeks that followed were not easy. They were quieter, yes, safer, but healing asked for discipline, and discipline demanded patience. Jaemin's days were filled with therapy, practice, and the slow rebuilding of a body that had learned to betray him. He fell. He failed. He learned again. Ava celebrated every inch of progress, like a victory parade. Naomi anchored the days with her calm presence, her firm expectations, her refusal to let him sink into frustration. Chairman Kong watched his son change, and changed with him. He began to step back, delegated more, listened longer. One evening, he joined Jae-min at the window, the city glowing below them. "I built this," Kong said, gesturing toward the skyline, "and I thought it would protect us." Jae-min said nothing. "I was wrong," Kong continued. "It only made me powerful, not wise." Jae-min turned his head slowly. "Then be wise now." Kong studied him, then nodded. "Teach me." It was the closest they would ever come to reconciliation, and it was enough. The final test did not come with violence. It came with choice. A proposal arrived through official channels, legitimate, public, scrutinized. A restructuring, a transition of power, a future that would place Jae-min at the head of an empire that had once defined him by fear. He read it carefully, twice, then a third time. That evening, he gathered them in the living room, his father, Naomi, Ava. "I won't run this the old way," he said quietly. "If I do this, it changes. Or I walk away." Kong did not argue. Naomi watched him closely. "And what do you want?" Jae-min looked at Ava, who was drawing on the floor, humming softly. Then he looked at Naomi, at his father. "I want a life that doesn't require silence to survive." The decision was made. The transition was slow, deliberate, public. Jaemin appeared in limited capacities at first, measured, controlled, unmistakably present. He spoke carefully, conserving his voice, but every word carried weight. People listened. They always had. What surprised them was not his authority. It was his restraint. On a clear afternoon months later, Jaemin stood in the garden below the penthouse, cane in hand, sunlight warming his face. Ava chased pigeons near the fountain, laughing. Naomi sat on a bench nearby, reviewing notes, pretending not to watch him. He walked to her. "I was thinking," he said. "That's dangerous," she replied lightly. He smiled. "I'm getting better at it." She looked up at him. "What were you thinking?" "That I don't want to lose this," he said simply. "Not you. Not her. Not this life." Naomi searched his face, the careful distance she had maintained finally softening. "Neither do I." He hesitated, then reached for her hand. She did not pull away. They did not need grand declarations. They had earned something quieter, stronger. Ava noticed anyway. She ran over and wedged herself between them, grabbing both their hands. "Good," she said decisively. "Families are better with more people." Jaemin laughed, the sound steady and unafraid. Naomi laughed with him. Above them, the city moved on, vast, unpredictable, alive. Jaemin looked at it without fear. He had lived in silence. He had survived it. And now, surrounded by the people who had taught him how to listen and how to speak, he chose a different life, one where silence was no longer a prison, but a place of peace he could return to whenever he wished. Thank you for listening to Paralyzed. Son of a Korean mafia boss lived in silence until a black little girl discovered the truth. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world. Until next time, Red Heart.